Hi, everyone. On behalf of Vivvi, my name is Jade, and I'm excited to welcome you to this Exploring Identity and Belonging webinar with young children. I am an early educator. I've been working in the early education space for about the last 10 years, with a focus, of course, on preschool, children from the age of birth to 5. And I very passionate about sort of identity and belonging in young children and what that looks like in classrooms, with families, all of those sorts of things. Personally, it's such a big part of my life, my identity and how I feel that I fit into the world. And so the more that I can do to support families and children to sort of feel that connection to the world and the people around them, I think the better. So I'm really excited to be joined today by Tabitha St. Bernard Jacobs. She's a wonderful anti-racist educator, as well as a parent and award-winning artist and writer as well. And she's a leading voice on sort of anti-racist education and practices that, to support families, to support schools, and to support really anyone who is interested in the topic and who is sort of committed and dedicated to supporting children. So today she's going to share some of her expertise on these topics, what that looks like with young children, ways that you can sort of talk about these topics with young children, and how to sort of keep a lens of caring warmth as we explain these concepts to children. So I'm going to let Tabitha jump in and sort of introduce herself, but I thought I'd first start by talking a little bit about Vivvi. So as I said, I work at Vivvi for the last sort of 2.5 years. We are a network of schools that support families from the age of birth up to sort of 5 years old. And not only do we support children with wonderful environments and settings, but it's also about supporting the families who are a part of our settings to make sure that they feel welcome, to make sure that they develop community. It can be very isolating to live in New York City, and so we want to create opportunities and communities. And so part of what that looks like is events that sort of support family connections, bringing the classroom and home connection to each other. So like inviting parents and families in and things like that. But maybe Tabitha, you can jump in and share a bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Jade. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for spending your lunch time with us. I know that there are other things that you can be doing right now. As Jade said, my name is Tabitha St. Bernard Jacobs. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a mom to two amazing children. They're 10 and 6. And I have been doing this work for quite some time. I started doing this work when my first child was very, very young. And my partner and I have always been involved in social justice work and activism and so forth. And when my son was around 2 years old, he came home and misidentified his racial identity. And my first impulse was sort of, who told you that? Like, where did you hear this from? Who's telling you these things? And what I came to realize was that my partner and I had been spending a lot of time sort of talking over him around topics like identity and belonging and anti racism and social justice. And we hadn't been as intentional about making it age appropriate for him, sort of taking all of these materials and making them approachable in a way that could actually be processed for a young child. So that started off my journey. I write for a couple parenting magazines, and my partner and I, we do work with libraries and schools and media companies and so forth, supporting parents and also educators on the work of anti-racism and raising children who feel a strong sense of belonging and are able to create an environment of belonging for others as well.
Thank you so much, Tabitha, for sharing. Before we get started, I just want to share a few like program logistics and, as we dive into the sort of webinar. So first, I just want to say thank you for sort of joining this and, for your participation. Already, I know it's going to be a great chat. And I'm so excited for Tabitha to share some of her insights and things that she's picked up over her years working as an educator in this space. We have about 45 minutes together. So Tabitha will spend about the first 30 running through her presentation. really great slides and some really great resources. The goal is that everyone leaves with at least one practical sort of tip or thing that they can use in their practice with their own child, or with the children that they are caregivers for. And then after that, we'll spend sort of the last 10 or 15 minutes going through some questions. A few people pre-submitted questions, and there's also a feature here where you can sort of ask questions as well. So we want to make sure that we're leaving space for that as well. So finally, we just want to acknowledge that this is a huge topic and, something that's very near and dear to, I think, everyone on this call's hearts. And so we just want to make sure that we're focused on those practical ways that we can sort of implement and support our children through their day-to-day life. I think, one of the best parts about sort of being an educator and being a caregiver is that we're supporting children as they grow and develop. And, we get to say what that looks like, and we get to support them on their journey of, being members of society who get to sort of share communities and act and make change and all of those things. But it's really about how we sort of support them to get to those points. And part of that is being intentional about the care that we're providing for them. Tabitha, I will turn it over to you. Please get started.
Thank you so much, Jade. And I just want to remind folks that if you have questions that come up as I'm talking, feel free to drop them in the Q&A little box you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible at the end. So let's dive in. Parenting that teaches about identity and belonging. And I just want to apologize for my voice if I'm being gross. I'm a parent. I live in a pool of germs all the time, and I think I'm catching something. So so the type of parenting that teaches about identity and belonging is really the type of parenting that emulates, models, and teaches values and practices to children that center a healthy understanding of identity and nurtures an awareness of belonging for all. So when we talk about belonging, we talk about a space and an environment where children can feel like they can be their full selves. They can bring their whole selves into the room, and also they're able to make space for others to really do the same. And there are so many assumptions around what that means, around what age children are ready, around what parents should be saying and doing to them with them at different stages. And we're going to delve into that right now. Jade, can you switch to the next slide? So my partner and I do a lot of work around anti-racist parenting. And one of the things that we have found that really resonates with parents and that really drives the point home is the power of research, the power of studies that have been done on the topic of not just anti-racist parenting, but also identity for young kids as well. So the first bit of research I want to share with you is that kids start forming ideas about race and identity before they have the language to express it. And many parents think that age is usually around 5, but the research has shown that kids are ready even before then, that kids have a sense of awareness around race and identity, and they start forming ideas based on what they're observing around them. And one of the things I want to leave you with today, I'm going to drop little bits of ideas throughout this webinar, but one thing I want you to remember is that our children are living in a society that centers and seeks to make normative whiteness and heteronormativity and gender binaries. And we're fighting against that through so many things around us, through what they see in the media. If your kids are on YouTube, it goes into, even if you're not allowing your kids to watch screens, it's what they see on billboards, in advertising. It's really all around them. A lot of times when kids come home and they may say things that might be shocking to us, that may indicate that they're having thoughts around identity and belonging, we may first wonder where they're getting it from, like I did when my son was 2. And the reality is that it's really all around them. It may not necessarily be something that they're picking up from a friend or an adult around them. It's really all around them. So, and our kids, I mean, we all know that children start processing and having thoughts about things before they actually have the language to express it. And we're going to show you another slide that tracks from ages 0 to 6 in a little while, where you can see actually where children are landing at each developmental stage. One other piece of research I wanted to be sure to share with you was a study that was done around white parents who identify as anti-racist. And what this study showed, it was a fairly small study, but I think the results can also be applicable across the board. What this study showed was that parents who have an awareness around anti-racism may not necessarily be putting this awareness into action. That sometimes the parents were wondering if they should put value judgments on things like slavery for their children. They were expressing satisfaction when their children came home and were thinking about color blindness, which is a concept where people say that they don't see race and color around them. These parents were expressing satisfaction when their children expressed color blindness. And we know that color blindness is invisibilization of people of color and of gender binaries and so forth. So that study is a study that has been so profound because it shows that just because a parent thinks that they are anti-racist and has a sense of awareness around these topics does not necessarily mean that it immediately equals action. We have to, as parents, be super intentional about translating these things into action. And I'm going to actually give you a framework later on that can address different ways that we can make this work of teaching our children about anti-racism and identity and gender and so forth, that it can actually make it actionable. So let's
Yeah,
jump to the next. Sorry, Jade, go ahead.
yeah, I think that, a wonderful thing that you're drawing out is also just at this age, children have a natural sense of curiosity about things that they've never seen before, or things that they've experienced before, or, even just things like foods they've never seen before. Things that they've never seen is something that comes up a lot when you're at that age of just having an interest and sort of wanting to know. And so part of it is also, using this research to work on like creating a safe space for children so that they can share that curiosity and they can bring those things to you of, I saw something new today that I'd never seen before. Someone at lunch had a different food that I've never seen before. And so creating an opportunity for children to sort of talk about those things as in an open way, and sort of shying away from being very surprised and shocked by what they're bringing to us, because it's really just from a place of curiosity. And, if you've never experienced something before and you don't know anything about it, of course, the first thing you're going to do is go to your trusted adult and sort of ask about it. So using that opportunity to, sometimes it can be shocking if children ask us a question about our race or about our hair or, different things like that. But using it as an opportunity to say, yeah, like, I have hair that's, this way, or I am this color and you are this color. I think it's really important to sort of build that's, something not to shy away from and not to talk about. So thank you for sharing, Tabitha.
Jade, I love that you are mentioning natural curiosity because I think sometimes we as adults, we put value judgments on things that kids say. It's one thing if the kid is saying something offensive, and we're actually going to talk about that a little later on today. But if your kid is having natural curiosity and they're expressing things, making observations and so forth,
Mhm.
these are really invitations for us as parents to start these conversations with our children and to deepen their understanding about what is some of these questions that they're asking, and to really delve with them into these topics of gender and race and so forth. Jade, can you switch to the second slide? I think I'm part two. So we're going to talk about this in a little while some more, but babies can start internalizing messages about race from as young as 3 months. And this study was shocking to a lot of people because people like to sort of have the idea that, um, children don't notice things from super young unless we put things on them. And that's simply not true. Some studies have shown that babies as young as 3 months start to notice similarities as it pertains to skin color with the people that are taking care of them the most. And another study that I really wanted to pull out because we got a question on this earlier, somebody who registered was asking about Black affirming media. and how it can play such a positive role in self-image for Black children. And we're going to provide some resources for you all around some books that you can use, some shows
Mhm.
that you can show kids from a super young age as well. But studies have also shown that in older Black kids, when they're able to see positive messages about Blackness, about their identity, and so forth, it can really improve their self-image and really help them have a strong sense of self and also identity.
Yeah, and just the idea of like representation is something that's grown so much over the last like several years of what does it mean to accurately and respectfully represent other cultures, and how can you sort of make that prevalent in your child's life? Thinking about different books, different toys, different dolls, like all those sorts of things are wonderful tools to use with young children because they also learn best through play and sort of through observation and the things that they're seeing. So how can we make sure that we're making environments for them that do highlight, the difference is, something to be celebrated and, something to be shared as well. How can we make sure that, the items and the things like that that we're showing for children are representing the concepts that we care about and that are important to us?
Yes, definitely. And I think also about the media that we expose our children to, particularly books. We want
Mhm.
to teach them history. We want to make sure that they have a strong grounding in accurate history. And also, we want to show them examples of Black children living, just simply living and having fun and having a range of emotions and,
Mhm.
you know, being in their neighborhood and being in their home and being with their siblings if they have any and so forth. I think there's such power in showing that balance that yes, we need to learn about our hard and difficult history and we need our kids to have that grounding, but we also need for them to see themselves reflected in media where they can just live their lives and be happy as well.
Mhm.
So this is a handout, and I'm hoping that Jade, we can share this out with folks afterwards. But this is a handout that sort of shows from age 0 to 6 plus how kids process race at different age. And I remember the first time I saw this handout, it was a little bit shocking for me as a new mom to really be understanding that if you look at from age 3, there are little bits of prejudice that are peaking around age 4 and 5 for children that can possibly peak at age 4 and 5 for children. And when you look at age 6, you see that some of these attitudes about a race and so forth have already been solidified with children. And my daughter's 6 years old, and I see this with her, and it's a constant work in progress with her. And also, one of the questions that we got before the webinar was also around if I haven't started having these conversations with my children, is it too late? If my kid is 6 plus and the studies show that some of these ideas are already solidified in their minds and so forth, is it too late? And it is never too late. Children are constantly growing cognitively, they're constantly growing emotionally, and we always have space to make interventions with them and to be able to educate them and to guide them and so forth as it pertains to their relationship with themselves, their relationship with people around them, their community, and so forth.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this is a wonderful sort of representation of things that we generally don't think about. The children are always with us. They're always with an adult. They're always with a caregiver, but we don't always think about what their brains are actually going through as they go through the world. When children are sitting in the stroller, for example, and, sort of facing outwards, they're taking in everything that is going on there. Maybe we're not because we're just focused on what we're doing, but the children are using those experiences to understand more about the world. And so the more that we can do to sort of support that journey as they are growing, I think the better. And so I think a wonderful representation of that.
Yes, definitely. So, what is the role of the parent and caregiver in teaching about identity and belonging? What can we do? We spoke a lot about what research has shown. We talk a little bit about what happens when you don't necessarily talk to your kids about these things from super young, but we're going to be a little bit asset based and we're going to give you some actionable skills. So, we want to stress the importance of expanding community, expanding reading, expanding conversations. And that looks like being expansive, always thinking about how can I broaden this conversation? How can I not sort of limit it to binaries and so forth? Being aware of gender stereotypes in the homes, even sometimes, we talk about, oh, girls do that, or these girls, they're always dressing up like this, or, boys are into sports and so forth. I think it's so important to sort of be aware of how gender stereotypes are presented in the home and really unpacking for our kids, just helping them broaden, as we talk about expansion, broaden their mind as it pertains to a lack of gender binaries. You know, encouraging emotional expression no matter your kid's gender, this is extremely, extremely important. Modeling vulnerability as parents is super important, whether you live in a single parent home, whether you have two parents, three, whether you have grandparents and so forth. The adults that the kids are looking up to just model vulnerability, model sometimes that adults make mistakes, adults are emotional, and we should all be striving, no matter what your gender is, to develop a certain sense of emotional capacity and maturity as adults. And we model that for our children. And the expectation is that they should do that as well. I am huge on correcting others who make comments about kids' identities and doing it in front of them, which doesn't mean that you're going to sort of get into like an altercation and raise your voice and so forth, but it means that our kids are watching, that if somebody makes a gendered comment around our child, they are watching how we respond to that, and they can learn from us about what it means to sort of gently course correct and gently
Mhm.
encourage people to sort of break down those really structured gender binaries that really exclude people is really what's at the core of these binaries. Um, Reject gender expectations. We spoke about that earlier. This idea that girls should be doing things and boys should be doing things, and it could be really subtle in the home as well. And I also want to point out, I love our grandparents so much for those of us who have them. Sometimes we got to work a little bit on the older generations because it's not as normalized for them as it is for us. They didn't grow up with this type of education available to them. So having patience with them, but also being gentle in our sort of course correction with them as well.
Yeah, I think the course correction piece is so important. And, a big thing to sort of call out as an actionable step is to use those opportunities. I think sometimes when we see a child say something, we are like, oh, like, I'm not gonna touch that. I'm gonna leave it alone. But actually
Hmm.
being able to sort of dip in and say, okay, like this is an opportunity to support my child in as a learning opportunity because it's all
Yes.
about learning and growing as adults, but definitely
Hmm.
as children. And sort of encouraging the self-reflection piece as well, I think is really important to sort of share your experience with the children and the way that you sort of go through life, like however that may be as a person of color or not. It's important that your children are able to sort of understand that and your perspective on it so that they can sort of, when people talk about things, we all feel more supported. So leaving
Yes.
room for that, I think, is important too.
Definitely, definitely. We do want to definitely encourage that self-reflection, that space where we're teaching children what it means to be human, what it means to be a person, and to have a range as it pertains to emotional capacity and so forth.
Mhm.
And I want to move on to the next slide. What age is most appropriate? This is a question that we get asked a lot in our work. When do I start? And I'm hoping that if you've been on the webinar thus far, that you're realizing that as young as possible is the answer. Um, and of course, as kids get older, as with everything else with parenting, your approach is going to change over time as they become cognitively different, as they become emotionally more aware. Your approach will become more nuanced. My son is 10 years old, and I remember that when he was much younger, we tried explaining a war to him, and he's a very tender soul. And it was very hard for him to understand. And now he's 10 years old, and we can have conversations with him that are very nuanced, where we can actually talk with him about some of the factual aspects of what's going on in this world. So it's up to us parents to always sort of adjust our approach as it pertains to talking about identity and belonging, and to meet our children really where they're at. We talk about being age appropriate, but we also talk about being kid appropriate. Every parent knows their child the best and
Mhm.
knows what they have capacity for emotionally, and should be able to adjust the approach according to that. And for babies, board books and toys,
Oh, sorry.
we talk about books and we talk about toys, and these things should be used for sure, but they should be used as tools to delve deeper into these conversations. Sorry, I'm being so gross. To delve deeper into these conversations with kids. Definitely sit down with your kid with a board book, but think about how you can ask open-ended questions. Questions like, can you share more? What do you think about this? What do you think about this picture? Can you tell me more about what you see here? And you'll notice that if your kids are super young, the conversation can last 2 seconds or it can be a little bit longer, but keep at it. And they will also understand that as they grow older, that the expectation when they're reading books is a deeper understanding of its contents and a deeper understanding of themselves as they see it reflected in the books and the toys and so forth.
Mhm.
We also talk about asking simple questions that can help children develop language and express their thoughts on the topic of identity and belonging. We spoke earlier about the fact that kids process things and they have a natural curiosity and they want to learn and they're thinking about a lot of these big concepts and sometimes don't have the language to really express it. And it's up to us to support them, us as parents, caregivers, educators, and so forth, it's really up to us to support them in developing that language as well from a really young age. And again, the conversations that I have with my 6-year-old is very different from the ones I have with my 10-year-old. So adjusting it to the age and the child is also super important. And the most important one is celebrate joy. We're living in really troubling times in this world right now, but we can still tease out bits of joy for our children. This is their childhood that they're living through. We can still sort of seek out joyful opportunities in this work for them. I think about
Mhm.
myself as a Black immigrant woman. There's so much joy in Blackness. There's so much joy in my identity, in like in the morning, like I love doing my hair and I love putting on my lips. Like these are just little things that bring me joy. And it's also important to teach kids to tease out these bits of joy about their identity for themselves, whatever it may look like. It may look like, like getting dressed up in the morning in their own outfit. It can maybe look like taking a different path to school, but tease out bits of joy in this work for sure.
And I think a part of that too is, highlighting joy for them as well. Like highlighting
Mhm.
parts of themselves that are very joyful that may, look a different way to someone else. For example, the hair is a wonderful example. If, you have a child who your children at school are calling attention to their hair in a way that feels negative, what can you do to sort of highlight those things? Like, share, like, I love doing my hair and this is a special part about me that's actually a wonderful thing because obviously we live in a society where people are going to sort of see that in one way. People are going to make value judgments about the way that you look, about your hair, about, the way that you dress, about the way that you speak. All these things are possible and we have to be understanding that children are growing up in a different world than we did and how can we support them and still center joy in who they are as a person while acknowledging that that might not always be the case. That might not always
Mhm.
be how people are seeing them, but just championing the fact that we see them and we value them, and for all of those pieces they are welcome and we celebrate them even if that's not something that they're seeing depending on the environments that they're in.
Yes, that's so true. And I think that when we are able to surround children with acceptance and love and belonging for who they are, when they're put in a situation where maybe somebody's being racist towards them, it will be foreign to them. They will be like,
Hmm.
this is strange for me because I'm so used to being loved and celebrated for who I am, which is what I think that we want. We want them to sort of we don't want this stuff to be normalized for them. We want them to feel a
Hmm.
sense of acceptance and belonging in their lives on a constant basis.
Absolutely.
I think yes. So let's talk about, I mentioned earlier that we do have a framework of actionable ways that parents can infuse lessons on identity and belonging with their children. We use this framework specifically around anti-racist parenting, but it could be applied to other big concepts as well. So the first one is continuous learning. And this is actually for us, the adults. It's for us to be responsible for our own learning, whether it's through books, whether it's through podcasts, whether it's through articles that we read. But we really need to understand that we have access to so much information right now that we have a responsibility to our children to teach them from a place of factual education. We know that our kids are looking to us for the answers for many of the things that they're sorting through in their lives, at least at a young age. As they get older, they don't want to listen to us. But at a young age, like they're coming to us for everything. And we want to be able to educate them from a place of information. The next one is consistent conversations. We've talked a lot in this webinar about the power of having conversations with kids, open-ended questions, sitting down with a book, really making it age appropriate and kid appropriate according to your child. So consistent conversations coming back to the same topic over and over again over time is really important. Community action. What does it look like to take these lessons into the community? To take these lessons into the community, to find local grassroots organizations that are aligned with our beliefs, that have similar goals of raising children who are bold change makers, and going to these organizations and really listening first as parents and finding ways that we can help support them in the work that they are doing. Reflective media. We've spoken a lot about books, and we're going to share some books with you all in a little while. Some really amazing kids' books that can reflect for kids the multiracial worlds that we all want to build for them. Intentional environment. Who are the people surrounding our children on a continuous basis? Who are the people we're exposing them to? Where are the places that we're taking them? Maybe on the weekend, the sports that they're doing, are those reflective of the world that we want to build? And parent caregiver modeling. It's so important. We touched on this a little earlier. We are our children's first teachers. And this doesn't mean that we have to feel like we have to be perfect all the time. That's not the expectation. That's actually an opportunity for us when we make mistakes to show them what repair looks like, to show them what restorative practices look like, to really model for our children the values that we want them to embody, to model that in the home for them. And how to talk to kids about identity and diversity, especially younger children. Jade, I think I lost are people
Oh,
seeing the slide? I think the slide fell down.
oh,
I
okay.
can see it. You're good.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. um, how to talk to kids about diversity and identity with little kids. Center different facets of identity like age, gender, race, ethnicity, immigration status. We really have to be intentional about decentering society's really normative approach to these attributes because, as we mentioned earlier, society will have our children centering whiteness and heteronormativity and gender binaries and so forth. And we as parents and caregivers, as adults in their lives, really have this tremendous opportunity to break those things down for our children. And it can look like using gender neutral terms when we don't know what gender people are. It could be parent and caregiver as opposed to mom and dad, sibling as opposed to brother, sister. We incorporate they, them pronouns into our children's play as well. It can be very seamless, the same way that sometimes children will label a doll a certain gender. You just introduce they, them pronouns, normalize it for children. Um, my daughter recently, and it's something that's always like sort of a teaching moment for us of like our generation because we didn't grow up like this. And I remember once I was walking down the street with my daughter and I saw this person in a really beautiful dress and I said, oh, I love her dress. And I just heard this little voice in the back of me going, Mom, how do you know it's a her? So she's always like thinking and always processing with me as we're trying to break down these gender binaries for her as well.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said about other, areas of identity around, neurodivergence or family structure or things like that, that also come up quite often in whatever setting children are in. And, as, what they're seeing outside, like all of those sorts of things are also things to sort of talk about and, not draw attention to. But if a question comes up, we want to sort of make sure that all of the identities that people can have, all the ways that they go through the world are sort of accepted and something to sort of be respected and, talked about in a respectful way. I definitely think when children start, entering school settings, they may be around children who have, additional needs or who need additional supports. And so just also bringing to the forefront that, a difference of need is also something to welcome and cherish and value, and what that might look like, and how that's okay that people have different, needs and, may need more help with something than something else. And those are things that are welcome and not something to sort of shy away from. And also just building a culture of acceptance for the children so that your child is the one who is able to make a friend with someone who they've never met before, who may be in a wheelchair or may be nonverbal. Those sorts of things are, I think, things that we want for all children, to sort of be that one who's able to be a friend or to introduce themselves to a child who may need friends. So that's something I think to think about as well, as we're thinking about like the different ways that you can, show identity, the different types of diversity that exist in the world, because there's quite a lot of them. And so I think sometimes we focus on sort of one or two, but I think it's important to sort of remember that there's many different identities that a person can have, ways that they go through the world, and sort of not trying to put people in a box of like, you are just this thing and you are just that thing, but it's actually, you're all of these things. And so how
Mhm.
can we sort of make sure that children are aware of that and sort of respecting and championing that?
Yes. And also realizing that some of these things are maybe visible and some may not be,
Mhm.
which is why we talk about expanding reading, expanding conversations, this concept of expansion with children, because there are some things that we can see, obviously, like you can see I'm a Black woman, I'm a Black woman, but you can't see that I have a disability. So encouraging children, even if they can't identify exactly everything about somebody, to have an open mind and to always approach people with openness, with a spirit of kindness, with warmth, with
Mhm.
love, and so forth. I cannot see the slides, Jade, so I don't know which slide you're
Oh,
on,
so
but
now we're on how to use books and other tools.
okay, awesome. So I think it's we spoke about this, and Jade, I'm so happy that you brought up, not like focusing on everything, a variety of skin tones, races, also talking about immigration statuses as we think about the times that we're living through right now, disabilities and so forth. And something that I do is I also provide guidance to the people in my kids' lives about the gifts that we would like them to consider when they're gifting our children, which doesn't mean that you're sort of dictating for people what to give to your children. You're providing guidance about the values that you hold in your home, and hoping that as people want to give gifts to children, that they consider these values in their gift giving. I remember that recently for my daughter's last birthday, my daughter received this really beautiful jewelry box from my sister with a Black ballerina, because she knows that we're like sort of in the midst of my daughter loving Frozen and wanting her to really embrace who she is and her hair texture and so forth. So my sister sent this really beautiful, intentional gift, really thoughtful gift for my daughter, that sort of marries her love of ballerinas and so forth with a reflection of who she is. So we talked a little bit about how to read earlier. Read a page, you pause, you ask your kids to point out what they're observing, asking open-ended questions and encouraging sensory play, and revisiting books that emulate the values that we want to center with our children. And something that we've found very effective with children is thinking about, we talked about earlier that parents know their kids best. You know what your kids are really in love with, you know what they're loving from time to time. Thinking about marrying the values that you want to teach them with with the things they already love. So my daughter is very much into hair. She's 6 years old. She loves like dressing up and so forth. But I also want to encourage her to love herself as she is, and to not sort of aim for, straight hair, blonde hair, and so forth. So we spend time braiding her hair. She really loves like braids and beads. She picks out styles that she wants me to do, and she'll ask me to do them. So finding things that they love and merging it with the values that we want to teach them is also another way to help to really support kids in internalizing some of these values as well.
Yeah, and I think that that highlights like a wonderful opportunity that we all have because I remember being young and, I was less excited to have braids and it wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily like a fun thing that I did with my mother, things like that. And so that we get to provide the opportunity for children nowadays to sort of have a different experience is so exciting and I think a wonderful part of getting to support the next generation of children, that they get to have that experience and have those times where their sort of identity is championed and it's not something that they have to hide as much,
Mhm.
because it's something that we're excited about and we love to see. So I think the black ballerina, that she was gifted, all those things are such wonderful, I think, points of hope, that the world that we're building for the children is different than the world that we grew up in. um
Yes.
so so thank you for sharing that. It's lovely.
Yeah.
And so the next slide is on sort of what can you do. uh
Yes. When we think about what we can do to infuse these lessons in our children's lives, I think it's one of the things I want to leave people with, one of the nuggets I want to leave people with is that yes, it's really important to think about, okay, we are going to be intentional about story time. We are going to be intentional about sitting down with books and reading and doing this and doing X, Y, and Z. But I also want you to think about infusing it into your everyday life. If you're going to the playground, is there a conversation that you can have asking your child, you know, is this playground a place where someone who uses a wheelchair will be able to navigate themselves? Like, how can we make this playground more wheelchair accessible? Places that kids already love, if there's like a favorite restaurant, walks that you go on, always sort of looking for opportunities to infuse these lessons and to really talk with kids about belonging and not just their own belonging, but on creating a sense of belonging for others as well. And we spoke about censoring joy. I'm huge on joy, especially in this moment. I think that's what's going to get us through, and teaching children to normalize their bodies as it pertains to feeling and experiencing joy, I think is a very revolutionary thing that we can teach our children from super young that can help carry them through into adulthood so that they know I deserve joy and I deserve joy even through the hard times, even if I'm fighting for liberation, even if I'm talking about really hard topics, we can infuse bits of joy into it. We should not wait until something happens in the news to sort of feel a sense of urgency. We saw in 2020, there was sort of like a global uprising around Black Lives Matter, and a lot of people felt like an urgency to talk to their kids about racial justice and so forth, which I think is an opportunity for sure. But I think there's also space for us as parents to be consistent and to constantly, going back to the six building blocks of anti-racist parenting, to be consistent with these lessons over time, and don't just wait until sort of something happens in the news to lead us to want to have a conversation with our children or to feel that thing inside of us that says, oh boy, I really got to talk to my kids about this.
mhm.
Be intentional about your community. We spoke about this a little bit with the six building blocks. Who are the people that you are surrounding your kids with? Who are the people that they're spending the most time with? Who are the friends that you have that they're seeing you spend the most time with as well is very important. And I jumped ahead and I spoke about this earlier about surrounding kids with books, media, and toys that also give a historical context, but also show just kids of the global majority living life, being kids, enjoying life, going through, regular sort of everyday things. There's power in a fusing of both those things. We do need to instill in our children a strong sense of accurate history and teaching them about their own heritage, the heritage of other cultures, and so forth. And we want them to see themselves reflected in books, just enjoying life as well.
Yeah.
And the next slide is the books, right, Jade?
Yes.
Yes. So we have some amazing, these are just like six of so many books. We know that in the kid book industry, we still do have a problem around there aren't as many diverse authors, there aren't as many books that feature diverse characters and so forth. But we know that there are still quite a few books out there that can teach our children about lessons of belonging and identity and so forth. And these are just a few of them that we wanted to share with you. We can send a couple more afterwards, but these are some really incredible ones. Feel free to take a picture of this slide. And these are really wonderful ones. I love Grandpa Across the Ocean because it talks a little bit about, I'm an immigrant and I have family back in Trinidad and Tobago. And it talks a little bit about that experience of having cross-cultural family relationships as well. And this is just me. The next slide is myself and my kids. The one on the right is my kid at a march, and we take them to marches often, both because we want to normalize for them that standing up for justice is just a part of what we do as a family. It's a family activity, and we also want them to know that, as with everything related to um, gender and identity and anti-racism and so forth, we actually have to take action to build the world that we want to see together, to build a world that we want our kids to inherit. And we want them
Mhm.
to be active participants in this world. The action part is a really key part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's like, the action part really starts. You think it's just like sort of adulthood as you see yourself as a person who sort of acts on the behalf of others who are not able to, but actually that starts at the, youngest age possible of just being able to observe those things, have conversations about them and take actions that sort of support whatever it is the topic is. So just
Mhm.
supporting the children to sort of like, know what to do if they do see something that they think is unjust,
Right.
sort of know how to sort of think about those things in a way that is positive and in a way that is, action based, because we do
Mhm.
want to sort of raise and support children to take action as they get older, because that's something that's important. Something that's important to me as an educator. I want, children who I'm supporting to, advocate for themselves, to know like what their likes and dislikes are, to know how to talk about those things. If they feel that they've been wronged in some way, to sort of speak up about it, and to sort of go to trusted adults, to caregivers for support. That, you're not living in a silo, you're not alone. People want to hear about what goes on with you and how you're feeling and the things that affect you. So I think that, wonderful sort of things that we can all do to support the children in our lives, to feel accepted, but also to feel like they have a voice and they can take action on things that, they feel compelled to.
Definitely. Definitely. We have a little bit of time to take some questions from folks. So I'm looking in the Q&A and I'm seeing a question. What age did I start taking my children to marches, and how did I ensure that the marches went well logistically? So I also happen to do a lot of march organizing as well. Um, I started taking my daughter went to her first march when she was 18 months old in a stroller. Some tips if you're taking your kid to a march that young is staying on the edge of the crowd, making sure that the temperature is right for them and so forth, making sure that
Mhm.
if they're a little older that you have watts and so forth. And how did I ensure that the marches went well logistically? I think that we are in a different sort of political climate right now. And some tips that I would recommend is, again, stay on the edge of the crowd, where you can still hear what's going on, but your kid sort of has space to sort of roam. If they're in a stroller, keep them in the stroller, bring some things with you to keep them occupied and so forth. A march that goes well logistically can look like very different things, but our responsibility as parents is to keep our kids safe. So I
Mhm.
always recommend, if you need to reach out to the march organizers ahead of time, many of these marches are organized by local community groups or national organizations. So reach out to them ahead of time if you have any safety questions or concerns, and they can usually help with that. I hope
Yeah.
that was
Oh,
helpful to you, Mara. Go ahead,
sure.
Jade.
I also think involving the children and, making signs or things like that,
Yes.
sort of
Yes.
talking about what it is that you are, what part of the march that feel impassioned by and how they can sort of, support in that, like making signs, things
Mhm.
like that are very helpful. There's
Yes.
another question in the chat also, around if you've heard your child make racist comments, how do you make sure that that stops happening?
That is a really Good question, and one that we hear quite often. So if you hear your child making a racist comment, so a couple things. If you hear your child making a racist comment, the first thing that you need to do is stop the behavior as you would any harmful behavior. So any tactic that you usually would use to stop harmful behavior, you use the same thing. But this is an opportunity for you to find out sort of what are the thoughts that are leading to this. So again, asking open-ended questions of them. Why would you say that? I think the first sort of most important thing is to think about is if there is harm being done to someone else, you need to sort of address that harm in the moment. And it could be something as simple as saying, I'm sorry, this is not okay. I will discuss this with my child. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to do an overly effusive apology. Just simply state, I'm sorry, this should not happen. I'm going to talk to my child. And if your kid is in a stroller, get down to their level and ask some open-ended questions about it. You're probably not going to find out the roots of it in that moment for sure. And this is an opportunity for you to go to the library and borrow some books about race, about the power of certain words and so forth. There are a lot of books. There's a book called Our Skin. It's a board book as well that talks about the beginning of the concepts of race and racism and so forth that you can read to really young children, and keeping the conversation open over time. But it's okay to say to your kid without shaming them that we don't say that in our family. That is unacceptable. That's unkind. That hurts. And think about what does it actually look like for repair afterwards. I never think that we should force kids to apologize to people, but thinking through the repair with the child when you've gone home, if it is out in public, when you've gone home, thinking through, we teach kids how to apologize by recognize, validate, rectify. You recognize the harm, you validate that the other person is hurting, and you think about what does repair look like to make sure it doesn't happen again, and really helping your child think through this process. It may be a conversation that you have over the course of a week, but it's a continuous conversation that needs to happen, especially if your child is saying something that's explicitly racist. That is something that needs to stop. So I hope that's helpful to you.
There's also a few questions that were pre-submitted.
Mhm,
One was, what should we be doing or saying to help our child narrate their identity?
mhm. Oh, so that's a really good question. I wanted to sort of interrogate this idea of a kid narrating their identity. I don't think it's necessarily important to me for a child to acknowledge, for a child to like verbally say, like, I am a Black child or I am a Latino child. I think it's more important for me that they're understanding what identity is and they're understanding their culture. I think the language will come over time and they will start to express it. For instance, my kids are Black multiracial children of Caribbean heritage and Jewish heritage. And that's a lot for them to understand multiraciality from a super young age. But we've been normalizing that concept to them over time so that my son is now 10 and he understands his racial identity, his cultural identity, his religious identity. But I'm not so concerned about them narrating it. I'm more concerned about them understanding, which is
Mhm.
what this whole webinar has been about. Books, conversations, actions, the 6 building blocks, and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another question in the chat. Our
Mhm.
5-year-old has moved into a new oppositional sort of defiant stage where ideas and values that we have are sort of flipped. So I think this is calling attention to when children are seemingly saying the opposite of the things that you've taught them or the values that you've instilled in them. What can you kind of do there to support with that?
So something that I have noticed, because I have one of those, is that it's a need for attention and connection, and it's a need to sort of get us activated. Um, so what I do is I try to remain as calm as possible, and I ask those open-ended questions about, like let's say for instance, an example of I like hitting people. you interrogate it a little bit more. I'm using a general example, but you interrogate it a little bit more. Do you know that when you do this, it hurts people? Do you like it when this is done to you? When we hurt people, this is what happens. When people hurt us, this is how we feel. So
Hmm.
short sentences, open-ended questions. I think it could be a phase as well. Kids many times as they're trying to establish their own identity may see it as a separation from their parents, and they may be trying to sort of like figure out in their mind what is different between me and my mom. And wow, look what I just did. I just gendered when I should have done an unknown. Yes, see, always lessons to learn. What I'm doing that's different from my parents.
Hmm.
Um, and I also think about focusing more on instilling the values than on the oppositional behavior and making it actionable as opposed to only verbally oriented, thinking about like reading books and that sort of what we were talking about the intersecting interests. What is your kid interested in? And how can you find books that they're interested in that also teaches the values that you want them to emulate, you want to be instilled in them, so that you're slipping in a little bit of like, you're slipping in a little bit of the carrot in the candy
Hmm.
kind of thing. That's a really bad analogy, but yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and I think like being able to set those boundaries on like what you think is appropriate and not. I
yeah.
think about like in a classroom setting, say like hitting other children. Everyone in this classroom deserves to feel safe. And
Hmm.
so hitting is not something, not a behavior that's sort of tolerated or allows you to be a part of the group because that's
Hmm.
just, the baseline. Everyone
Yeah.
deserves to feel safe. And so things that don't make people feel safe are not welcomed in this space. And so obviously, children are testing boundaries all the time and sort of trying to push the limits of, what behavior is appropriate and, what behavior gets a reaction or things like that. And so I think being able to sort of remain very firm in those times about this is, a behavior that is appropriate or inappropriate or behavior that hurts people specifically is something that is never sort of tolerated and, not a joke or not something that we find funny. I think is important to sort of to share with children that certain things there are a no-go, right? The safety of
Yeah.
others, respect for others, all of those things are baseline, regardless of like if you like someone, if you don't like them, if you know them well, if you don't know them well. So thinking about what are those baselines that are we respect, we care, we whatever it is, so that the children know sort of where you stand and that that doesn't waver, even if they are pushing those boundaries.
Jade, I love that you brought in safety as well, because safety is something that children understand from a super young age. What is
Hmm.
safe, what is fair, what is kind, what is respectful, and bringing it back to these sort of really basic concepts that really we should all be emulating and living in our lives all the time. Um, but yeah, I love that you brought in safety. Thank you for that.
And there was another question. I think we have time for one more.
Hmm.
Just more sort of child-friendly ways of explaining big concepts, like,
Hmm.
or using community events, books, art, music, history. How do you sort of come up with sort of resources for that?
So if you live in a so there are different things. If you live in a place where, like, let's say you live in a city, there are so many opportunities. If you look at your local children's museum, if you look at your local community center, um uh there's so many opportunities around you for events that you can take your children to that can sort of reflect the community that we want to build together. So really seeking out those resources. Brooklyn Public Library always has events.
Mhm.
They have Anti-Racist Family Day that's happening tomorrow. So they always have a bunch of events if you're based in Brooklyn. But this is like if you're a part of a city. If you do not live in a city and you don't have as much in-person access, we love the in-person. It's so different when you're able to be with people and feel their energy and be in community with them. But if you cannot have that, then there are lots of online opportunities as well to build community and to attend events. This is an online event right now. There are lots of things that kids can take part in that where they're still able to sort of get an education around, while still having fun, get an education around lessons around diversity and belonging and equity and so forth. But yes, I also write a newsletter called Raising Anti-Racist Kids, where when we take part in events or when we hear about events for kids as well, we put it out on our Substack. So that's for those who are predominantly based in New York and New Jersey. But look in your community, there's usually a lot to be had. And usually people are very excited for families
Mhm.
to attend their events like Juneteenth events and Kwanzaa events and so forth. There's a lot that usually
Yeah.
happens in communities.
And I think about, using the things that your children really like as well as opportunities. I think about, I'm an avid gardener, and so the botanical garden often, for example,
Yeah.
often has events about flowers from different cultures or different areas of the world, for example. Things like
Hmm.
that, finding a way in. The Science Museum also
Yes.
sort of has things depending on the time of year about,
Hmm.
different cultures, different people in history who have advanced
Hmm.
science, for example. So
Hmm.
using your child's innate interest to sort of come up with opportunities that highlight those things in a way that feels nice to them.
Yeah.
But thank you again, Tabitha, so much. This has been so lovely to chat to you for the last hour. Thank you for all the research, the insightful tips, things like that. We will be sending a copy of the recording along with the resources that Tabitha shared and sort of any other things that we come up with that we think may be helpful for this group. And we'll follow up with a copy of the recording as well. But I just want to thank everyone for spending some time with us talking about a topic that's very important and near and dear to both Tabitha and my hearts. And hopefully this was useful for you, but please reach out to us. My email is jade@vivvi.co. And Tabitha, you can share your information too. But thank you so much.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Jade. This was such a lovely conversation. Thank you, Vivi, for having me and for all the work that you continue to do to help children feel belonging and create a sense of belonging in their communities. You can find me at Tabitha SB on Instagram. You can join our Substack at raisingantiracistkids.com. Yeah, I hope to see. Thank you so much for being on. I know that we're a little over, so I really appreciate everybody for staying on.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
All
Tabitha.
right. Take care. Bye.